Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. Sorry. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here tonight to do an episode of the live stream that we do called Into the Progverse. Tonight we're going to be talking about those great progressive rock vocalists. Who's our favorites? Which ones do we love? Which ones do we don't love? We have some of them too. But I'm going to kind of concentrate here on the ones I do love, not so much on the ones I don't love. It's like having those old girlfriends that you don't really want to talk about the ones you'd rather forget, right? Anyways, I'm going to put my glasses on, even though they're kind of fogged up here. Hey, Wade, good evening and welcome to the channel. So that's the topic tonight. Those great progressive rock vocalists that we love. Sorry, I was eating some food here. I seem to have captured more of it on my face than I care to admit. Anyways, I brought a stack of albums of vocalists that I like. They're not in any particular order, but we will just be talking about them throughout the evening until people get tired of talking about it and start talking about everything under the sun, which is usually what happens. So I'm going to talk about this guy first because IQ. So this is Peter Nichols. This was my wake-up call on him, but it wasn't a good wake-up call at first. I would have to say I did not like his vocals initially. I don't know why. This was released in 1985. You see how young looking they are here. Almost look like new wave guys, eh? So anyways, you got Peter Nichols. This is their debut album. Well, not their debut, actually. I think this is their second album, their second studio album. Featuring Paul Cook, Tim Isu, Mike Holmes, Peter Nichols, and Martin Orford. Now, Peter Nichols has that. It's not totally dissimilar from Peter Gabriel, but a much higher version of his voice. I think it's quite a bit higher, actually. When I first heard it, I thought it sounded kind of whiny and it was kind of strange, so I didn't really like it too much at first, in the first couple of times through on this album. But it started to grow on me by about the third time through. Yes, I guess James LaBrie, some people consider him a great progressive metal vocalist. I'm not a Dream Theater fan, I have to say. I don't dislike them. I have some of their stuff, but it's just, I never go to it. So for me, what normally happens if I buy stuff that was recommended by people and then I listen to it and it doesn't do anything to me, it just sits on the shelf. Doesn't necessarily mean that I dislike it, but I've not been forced to listen to it again, so I generally don't. I tend to go to the stuff I like to listen to. So a lot of people like James LaBrie. I see his name mentioned a lot throughout many of the channels that I watch. But for me, I'm not a big, like I said, I'm not a big fan of Dream Theater. I don't dislike them, just don't follow them. I like these guys a hell of a lot better. I've got about a half dozen to 7 or 8 of their albums now. I like them all great. Absolutely fantastic sounding group. Very kind of in that Genesis mode for sure early on. Not so much now. I think they've kind of broken away from that a bit and kind of have their own sound, although you can still hear bits and pieces of it there. But to me, the strongest part of them, other than their drums, which I really love, and their keyboard sounds, is Peter Nichols' voice. There's a few albums where he had left the band, that they got a different vocalist that wasn't really the same. So this guy is a big guy for me, at least among the newer stuff in my collection. Next guy up, I'll talk about two guys because they both sang in the same band. I think you know where we're going with this. So the first guy, of course, Peter Gabriel. Not too totally dissimilar from Peter Nichols, but definitely one of my favorite vocalists. He's got a bit of a strained voice, though, Peter Gabriel. I don't know if strained is a good word. That sounds like he's pushing his voice to do stuff. It's just different sounding, and it's really hard to imitate his voice. It's got a little bit of a husky sound to it at times, but smooth at the same time. Everything about him is just small bits and pieces. But the stuff that he did with Genesis early on, and then his own solo stuff, like stuff on this album, which is one of my favorite Peter Gabriel albums. This is his live one. It's just fantastic. His voice is fantastic. The new album, is it called IQ? I/Q? I'm not sure. Can't remember. Very different sounding vocal. But clear as hell, man. And he hasn't lost any edge to his voice over the years. That's not always the truth with a lot of vocalists, but in his case, it is. And of course, his bandmate and replacement, Phil Collins. The early Phil Collins stuff is fantastic. Even on his solo album, his voice is fantastic. Just killer on this album and Trick of the Tail, but also good on some of his solo stuff as well. And did do some vocals on Steve Hackett's first solo album as well. All really good. Towards the end of his career, not as good, I think. He tried to do some cutie things that just really didn't cut the mustard, I don't think. But overall, just a fantastic vocalist. Now, another guy who's really grown on me with each and every album that I own, and although his voice is pretty much shot, it's not even really a singing voice anymore. It's more of a talking voice, which is Jethro Tull's Ian Anderson. He has a fantastic voice. I love hearing it. It suits the music so well. He's got a lot of range. It's got a little bit of that raspiness to his voice at times too, but almost kind of operatic at times as well. But not so much anymore. His vocals are pretty much destroyed now. So they've written the music, fortunately for him, to kind of include his voice, so that the range in which they've written the music makes his voice sound natural to the sound. But it's really not all that good anymore. And it's the first one back after that 20 years. I thought he was it was pretty good. There's some good songs too in the song. If you have good written songs, you can tolerate some not so great vocals. But the last couple of albums, hit and miss. There's a few good tracks on these, on the second one that they did back, but the third one's better. A better written album, but the vocals are still not great at all. It would be nice if he would just play the flute and get somebody else to sing. I don't want to say that. That's terrible, but that's the way I feel. Like he does that on tour a lot, where he will have a vocalist out with him on tour who just does that old stuff that he can't simply do anymore. I wish he would do a little bit more of that on their album. I mean, a lot of people are doing it now because the guys just can't. Not everybody's voice survives into their 70s, right? So Jethro Tull, much of what's on this album I absolutely adore. My favorite song by them is on here. Where is it? I'm looking for it here. Yeah, Life is a Long Song. That's my favorite Tull song. And I think he does an amazing view of it. Even Locomotive Breath is fantastic tune, man. It's a great vocalist. So another one up, more famous with a different band than this one, but this is the band that I follow with him. talking about Greg Lake. This is King Crimson's second studio album, which is In the Wake of Poseidon. He's great on this. He's great on their first album, In the Court of the Crimson King. And he's also good on the Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff, but I don't really listen to that, so I don't get as much of a time with him as that probably I would if he was still singing with these guys. He did do a solo album that I owned, I thought was quite good as well. So yeah, Greg Lake, another guy, fantastic vocalist. And I go off into a bit of a tangent here. So this band, many people think of as not really 100% progressive. Yeah, they have some progressive stuff, but a lot of people will argue that they're not progressive. Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. I tend to think of them as progressive because the progressive stuff they do that I really like. And we're talking about Pink Floyd. Now, they have 3 good vocalists, but I think David Gilmour really is the guy here. He has one of those voices that I've come to be, to me, it's synonymous with Pink Floyd. Just an absolute killer voice. It's different sounding than anybody else's voice. Really suits the kind of spacey rock feel that this band has, and especially when he does those kind of duet parts with the keyboardist Richard Wright. There's a couple of songs they do a kind of dual vocalist, and it's just absolutely great harmony. Incredible stuff. And I would say David Gilmour is a top 10 vocalist for me. Even, I don't really like his solo stuff. I don't follow it. Not gotten into it. Maybe it'll change. But as far as the Pink Floyd stuff go, to me, he's the guy to go to. Next guy up, another really good vocalist, very different sounding. It's not that his voice is all that great or that it doesn't have some issues to it. It's the songs really make this fantastic. And we're talking about Caravan. Just some absolute killer stuff. This album cover is fantastic as well. Let's see the back here. Really, really, really great stuff. So you've got the 6 members of the band. You'll see them up here. And the one that I like, the guitar, the vocalist, the one who does the best vocalist, I believe, is Richard St. Clair. I think it's him. I think it's him that does the main vocals for the band. He's got a bit of a quirky English-sounding voice. At times, a little bit on the nasally side, but a lot of it is just, it comes across at times as very kind of emotional, sad almost, but fantastic vocalist. I consider him to be one of the guys I kind of discovered on this channel. I think is really good and needs a lot more attention. The next guy actually sings on both of these groups. So I'm going to bring them both up at the same time. So we're talking about the vocalist from Wobbler here. Really good. Pressmo. Take this out and show you. I like this cover too. The green really does something for me. I'm not sure why, but I'm a green guy. Yeah, really good. So Andres Wetgreen Stroman Pressmo is the vocalist for Wobbler, one of my favorite bands I discovered through doing this medium. And he also does vocals on this band, which is The Chronicles of Father Robin. This has some very good singing on it, some of his best. Maybe I like him. Maybe I like his vocal performance on this even more than on this. I like the Wobbler stuff a lot. The music I probably maybe like more than this. It's hard to tell. They only have the 3 albums, and they all came out at the same time, so it's difficult to kind of say whether I like this more or the Wobbler more. But I think I've had the Wobbler stuff longer, so I probably like it more. But I still think this guy is just very good vocalist. He does sing in the same range as John Anderson, but not 100%. Doesn't really sound 100% like him, but it's still in that range. Next guy up I want to talk about, it was actually 2 guys from Supertramp. Now, Supertramp, some people would say, are not really progressive. They are kind of a trifecta, I would call them: blues rock, pop rock, and progressive rock, all kind of mixed together in varying degrees, depending on what album you're listening to. This one here has a lot of all 3 of them. I like both vocalists quite a bit. They're very different sounding. With Ricky Davies, very kind of bluesy sounding vocals, more midstream kind of, whereas with Hodgson, sorry, I can remember his name for a minute, Roger Hodgson, he uses that soprano falsetto voice that he has, but he uses it to great effect. Many of their great hits, like especially their pop stuff, is very much dominated by his voice. But I will say that a lot of my favorite stuff by them is the more proggy stuff. And then the last guy, I have an album here for, John Anderson. I could have pulled out any one of a dozen albums, and it doesn't really matter when it came out. Like, it could go back as far as this one, way back in 72, or you can go with the one most recent, John Anderson and the Band Geeks album, True, which just came out this year or the year before. I think it's the year before, 2024. Almost 50 years have gone by, and there's no different sounds in his voice at all. He still is exactly as good as he was those 50 years ago. This absolutely incredible vocalist. So if I had to put somebody at the top of who's my favorite vocalist among the progressive ones, I do have my list of people I love among the other genres of music as well. But if I had to pick one among the progressive ones, I would say it would be between John Anderson and Ian Anderson. Those are probably my 2 favorites, although Peter Gabriel would be very close in a 3rd spot. Maybe we would have Peter Nichols in there somewhere as well. If I was including Styx in this, all 3 of their vocalists would be right near the top as well. Some people consider them progressive rock. I kind of consider them more pop, hard rock, pop, and then maybe progressive. Now, they did have some progressive stuff, obviously, on both Pieces of 8 and The Grand Illusion, which I consider to be their 2 biggest albums, and in more recently with their newer stuff too. But they're very short songs, so hard to give them full progressive elements there, but they have huge progressive element. Maybe they've crossed the line and become more of a progressive band. They started out that way. They've maybe come back to that way, but their music is varied in a lot of ways. So I didn't actually include them in, but if you want to include them, you could include them. Both JY and Tommy Shaw are fantastic, and not to mention that Dennis DeYoung may be amongst, if not my favorite vocalist of all time. So those are the vocalists that I most enjoy. People say, well, you didn't bring up Geddy Lee, and Rush is your favorite band. Well, I don't think of Geddy Lee's voice as being great. Early on, it had its own kind of flavor to it that was very kind of almost vibratic in its singing, but he's lost a ton of stuff over the last 2 decades. His voice really has strained to maintain any semblance of what it used to sound like. And so it's difficult for me to put him up there as much as I do like his vocals. I will say I do, for sure. What other progressive bands did I not mention here that need to be mentioned? Well, of course, I didn't mention Gentle Giant. I never was a huge fan of Gentle Giant's vocals for the longest time, so it's difficult for me to still all of a sudden think that they're great. I think their harmonies are fantastic. Their individual vocal sounds are, to me, a little on the thin side, although I think Derek has a much heavier voice than the other guys. But to me, they all kind of sound similar, just varying degrees of heaviness to their voice. They sound fantastic together. Their harmonies are very good, at least in my opinion, anyways. If I had to, who else? Well, there's a few newer bands that I've been listening to that are progressive that I find the vocals pretty good. The Eden Song, which is a band that I bought a couple albums off of last month. One of them, the new one, I thought was pretty good. Ellesmere's another good one like that. For female vocalists, I've never been a huge follower of female vocals. Maybe does that make me sexist? Maybe, I guess. I don't know. It's just something about their voice doesn't really appeal to me as much, at least not in the rock genre. Now, in some of the other genres, I listen to some of the big band era stuff and some of the maybe pop diva bands. I think the females dominate in those two, but not so much here in the rock elements. Although, you could say Annie Haslam. She's got a great voice. A little bit on the high side for me, a little bit maybe too high. Part of the reason I don't really care, I think, for the female vocalists as much is because of it's difficult when I'm singing to try and range myself there. Yeah, he's not great now for sure. His voice sounds very strained. At least it did on the last album and in their last, towards the end of their career. But early on, I thought he had a very good voice, very suitable to their music, high pitched. You knew when you were hearing Rush, you knew who it was right away because of his high pitched, kind of almost vibratic type voice. He was always on pitch for what he was singing. Now, a lot of people don't like that high voice. They look at it as screechy. To me, screechy is Aerosmith's guy. That guy has a very screechy voice, unlike, say, somebody like Ian Gillan, who I think screams a lot, but doesn't have a screechy voice. The only real progressive rock vocalist that I don't care for at all, even slightly, can't even stomach 1 minute of listening to him is Peter Hamill from Vandergraaf Generator. Just grates on my soul, that voice. Although Amorphous Androgynous, when they did that album with him doing the vocals, they arranged his vocals in such a way that they weren't dominating and that they weren't frontal. And I think that was a perfect way of handling him because I actually like that album and the vocals on it. But overall, I would say those are the ones that I most like. Now, individually, some of the stuff that you get on Alan Parsons' project, for instance, a lot of different people singing on that. Some of them I really like, some of the stuff. And the way he's arranged his music suits the vocals that he's chosen to put on there. Steely Dan's kind of like that too. More so with the music than with the vocal parts. I wouldn't call Steely Dan, though, a progressive rock band. To me, they're a blues, jazz kind of poppy kind of band. If you, I'm trying to think of the other band that was coming to me. So another band that I like a lot, there's actually two of them, both of them space rock bands, Hawkwind, Eloy. Like both those bands a lot. Eloy, I've kind of grown used to Frank's voice. It's not a great voice. It's, it sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger singing to me, but and it seems kind of out of sync with the music, but I've gotten kind of used to his voice. It doesn't really bother me too much anymore. Hawkwind, David Brock has a good voice. I wouldn't call him a great voice. I think he sings the songs the way he wants to sing them, but they're not. I don't listen to Hawkwind for the vocal parts. Let's put it that way. I don't think he's terrible, though, not by any stretch. Of the space rock bands, obviously, when Pink Floyd is doing its space rock thing, very few people come close to David Gilmour's voice for that kind of music. He's just absolutely nails it. He just has a real haunting voice, you know. And like I said, when he sings with Richard Wright, when they sing together, it's even better. I'm not a huge fan of Roger Waters' voice or of Roger Waters, period, but he's not terrible either. He's not a terrible vocalist. And at times when he does the vocals, I kind of like the music, so I kind of put up with the vocals. They don't really bother me or distract me in any way. And before I forget, we will be doing the other 2 live streams. So one of them will be this week for at the Hammer of the Gods, which is my metal show. We're going to be talking about Iron Maiden. Another great vocalist, but not really in the same realm of what we're talking about today. And then the other show, I've decided to move it from Saturday to Sunday to avoid any kind of conflicts like I had last week. So it'll come out Sunday at 9 in case people missed out on that. And we'll be doing these guys. We're doing my Kiss collection from 1970s, just the 70s stuff, nothing beyond. That's the title of the series, 70s, ranking the 1970s hard rockers. And that's what I'll be doing on that show, just ranking albums from hard rock bands that came out in the 70s. So I don't know how long that series will last, but it'll last until I get tired of doing it, I guess. So those are the other 2 live streams I'm going to trying to do. I'm going to try to do one at 9 in the morning just to give people who are maybe on the other side of the planet a chance to get in on it if they wish to. So Wade, who are the guys you like other than James LeBray? I did purchase a few albums today, put them on my stack for the end of the month. I didn't think I would actually get many this month, but I've already got 9. Been mostly from the used bin. Only one new album that new in the sense that the album is brand new, but it's not new. It's from quite a few years ago, 50 some years ago, where the only new stuff, I haven't bought any new stuff this month so far. I am waiting on the Styx album to come in at the record store. I know many people already have it because they went to the concerts and they were selling the CDs and the CDs and the vinyls at the concert to try and promote the album. And on the 27th of July, I think it's the 27th or 26th, in that time period, they're going to put out, their album will be put on so that you can buy it through online. In my case, I'll be buying it at the record store. When they get it, I will get it. I've got 2 albums on order with them, that one and another kind of hard rock metal one. Actually, it's probably Metal Teaser Suite. I did like that album quite a bit, so I was willing to pay extra to get it, but couldn't get it online because it's British and it would have cost a bundle to import it because of our shitty economy here. So we will do that one. The metal one on Thursday night. Now, last week it was kind of a first episode, so I wasn't on for very long. Just wanted to talk about the title of the thing and about the song that I took it from. So this week we're going to do the Iron Maiden thing. My next my next one of these ones in the prog seat, I'm going to do a Styx one. Actually, I've been planning on doing it, even though I don't really consider Styx a full prog band, but I'm going to do one. Next week, we're going to talk about the discography, my Styx collection. Really, I've got like maybe 15 albums by them. Some of them are collections. What do they call them? Can't think of what they're called. Anyways, I'm going to be doing them. I have one live one by them. I have a couple of collection albums. I can't think of what they're called right now. I'm drawing a blank. And then, of course, all of their studio discography as well, or most of it. It's a few albums in the 90s and 80s that I don't have. And in some ways, I don't really want, but that's the way it is with me. I got to have them all, right? Even albums that I may not necessarily want to listen to too much. I have 2 Rush albums that I've rarely put on the one. I don't think I opened it the first day, played it, and I don't think I've played it since. And that's Power Windows. There's nothing about that album that even remotely interests me. If I was going to choose, if I was going to just collect the albums I like, I don't think there's very many bands I would have all the albums of. The only one that comes to mind is maybe Supertramp, right off the top of my head. They're probably the only band I do. Now, some people would say that Queen is a prog band, at least initially. Their first, their second, maybe their third album, fourth, fifth album, those albums in there. The News of the World, Night at the Opera, Day at the Races, Queen 2. Those ones had a lot of progginess to it. Most people think of Queen 2 as a prog album. Maybe it is. If you're going to add that guy in as a prog vocalist, which I don't see how you can, but if you were going to add him in, he would be among the very best of all time. Nobody has the kind of range he has. Nobody I've ever heard, anyways. Some people would even go as far as to say David Bowie has some prog stuff in his music. I'm not going to, a lot of bands have some prog in their music, little bits and pieces here and there. David Bowie doesn't really have a prog voice, if you ask me. He did do that Tin. Is it Tin Man? Is it Tin Man? I think it's called Tin Man. It was a metal band, which was kind of surprising. Maybe I'll feature him one time on the metal show. Yeah, so when you think about Yes's albums too, if you look at their first, so what's this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. First 10 or so, or is it 9? Well, first 8 or 9 albums with John Anderson are all really good, varying degrees of great in my. Yeah, I don't know that Queen. I think Queen is a rock band. They do have some kind of pop elements to their music for sure. At least later on in their career, they're very poppy. But if you listen to those albums right up to News of the World, those albums are all pretty rockin' albums. A lot of prog in there, a lot of heaviness in there, a lot of just straight rock and roll too. And he's a great vocalist for that band for sure. But with Yes, yeah, those first 8 or 9 albums with John Anderson are fantastic. Then even the album with Drama, although I don't think of Trevor Horn as being a great vocalist, I think he was pretty good on that album though. And then they came back with the 3 kind of pop albums, very different sounding. Wouldn't call them prog at all. They did do some stuff later with John Anderson coming back into the band in the 90s. the two Keys to Ascension albums, the Ladder and Magnification. These are all pretty decent albums. Nothing fantastic, but still pretty decent. Yeah, definitely. The Beatles are more than a rock band. They started out as kind of a pop band. I would almost call them a boy band if they weren't playing instruments. But once they got into the psychedelic era of their music, much more of a rock band than they originally were. And then I could almost see that if they had gone into the 70s, like started making more albums in the 70s, you would have seen some prog for them for sure. Absolutely would have been some prog stuff on their music. But they broke up right at the beginning of that era when prog was just sort of starting and not really out there, but influential on prog. Absolutely one of the main influences on that music style to come forward. And I do like John Lennon's voice quite a bit, although it's a bit kind of, how do you want to call it? Out of tune at times, but I do like his voice. Like their stuff a lot. Play it a lot too. Got all of their stuff. It's funny how I don't really care much for their solo stuff, any of them, except for maybe a little bit of George Harrison stuff I like, a little bit of Paul McCartney stuff I like, and even a little bit of John Lennon. John Lennon stuff I think would have been better if he had told his wife to stay home. But I guess you can't do that when you have somebody who thinks they can sing when they really are just annoying as hell. One of the worst vocalists I've ever heard, to be honest with you. Hello, Grandizer. Welcome to the channel. Well, I don't really make prog. I just listen to it. Today, we're kind of doing the prog vocalists that we think are among the best vocalists out there. Yeah, she's a terrible vocalist. I think maybe her and Peter Hamill should do an album together. I wouldn't buy it, but they could do one together. And it would be a contest to see who was the worst, I think. Now, a lot of people do like Peter Hamill, so I should give him some credit where credit is due. Her, nobody likes her. I can't remember her actually. Did she have hits? I don't think she had any hits. You think she had some hits? What were they? I don't know them. Yeah, you're right, Wade. She is horrible. I've got a couple of John Lennon albums, but she sings on them, so they haven't even got out of the listening to list. That stack right there, the back, beside my Yes albums at the top there, those are all albums I have not listened to yet that I've been working through. And the red one in the middle at the bottom, that's a John Lennon album, and I've never put it on. I've tried several times to play it. Can't stand the sound of her voice. It's just terrible. No, I think I'll pass on that. Just the thought of even putting anything on, I don't even want that on my turntable. Sorry. Some people you just can't digest, right? She's definitely one for me. There's other people whose voices I don't really care much for either, but I don't think there's anybody as bad as her, in my opinion. So would you guys call this a prog album? Would you think this would be prog? Prog, progressive pop, progressive blues? I don't know. How would you say it? Sisters, oh sisters. I don't recall that song. This was on her own album, right? This wasn't on one with John Lennon. This was just on her own stuff, right? Yeah, this Supertramp. Yeah, I think this one. There's a couple of their albums that came out after Roger Hodgson left later in the '80s. I think there's two of them. The one really progressive sounding, more progressive sounding than anything else they've done, I think. Okay. Well, I don't know that I could handle even listening to that. Maybe I'll give it a check later just so I could hear what she sounds like. I just can't imagine her voice being anything close to anything good. That voice is like great somewhere. It's like chalk on a nails on a chalkboard type thing. So if you guys were going to put out who you think the best progressive rock vocalists are, would you put John Anderson on that list? Greg Lake, Ian Anderson, Peter Gabriel. This is a great album. This one is one of my favorites. You know, it's a live album, and I don't normally choose live albums over the studio albums, but I do like this one quite a bit. It's got all of the stuff that I really like by him too. Like every song on this is really good, except for maybe Family Snapshot. The San Jacinto on here and No Self Control are probably the better versions of their songs than the studio albums. Those two are the two that San Jacinto probably, and I Go Swimming, which is on here, but not on really any other album, are both really good. I Go Swimming and San Jacinto, really good. Really good sounding songs. It's funny, Janis Joplin is one of those vocalists too that is kind of loved and hated. Some people really love her, some really hate her. She has a real scratchy kind of really raspy voice. It smells like a smoker's voice in some ways, but she can belt it out, I can tell you that. They probably there's a couple of songs that Supertramp does that where they've done different versions for the radio. They're called single versions that are very different from the album versions. I have heard them too. Yeah, some people really don't like Janis Joplin. I happen to be a fan of hers. I like her. I like the sound of her voice. It's different. I don't think she would fit very well here in the progressive rock field, though. To me, when I think of her, I think of that bluesy sound, and you want that kind of raspy feel to it. There's a few, even David Lee Roth, when he does that bluesy stuff, he does a kind of a raspy voice to it, which I think suits it. And he doesn't have the best of voices, but for those kind of songs, I think he fits very well. Yeah, everybody has their people they don't like. I used to feel that kind of way about the guy from Budgie. Can't think of his name now, but he has a voice that's kind of irritated me a bit. But I've been listening to them enough now that he's kind of like Frank Borman from Eloy. Just now, it doesn't really bother me too much. I guess I've accustomed myself to it. No, the Doors, I never felt that way about. I didn't like their music mostly because of the keyboards. I never really liked the keyboard sound. Their music wasn't really music I would listen to. So for the longest time, I wouldn't listen to them because I just didn't think, I thought they were overrated and people made a big deal out of stuff, especially his readings. But his voice can be quite raspy at times too. Um, Morrison's voice can be very raspy at times, but he has a smooth voice as well. And the combination of both really kind of suit the Doors' style of music. They're not the same band without him. And I don't think any band that had a guy like that singing for them could go on very long without him. Yeah, a lot of people. She died young. She had a lifestyle that wasn't going to be conducive to long life. A lot of people think Jim Morrison is overrated. I think lyrically he might be overrated, but the songs that they put out, now that I've been listening to them, nobody really sounds like them. Those bands coming out of the 60s, none of them sounded anything like the Doors, really. Even the keyboard, which I don't really care for the sound of that keyboard, not the keyboardist. I want to make that clear. I like that keyboardist. I think he's good. I just don't like his choice of keyboard sounds. Yes, I liked the Big Brother and the Holding Company too. That was where I kind of got my start with Janice. I have one of their albums. I actually liked her. I actually preferred her better than her solo stuff because I think the musicianship was better on those albums too. I think he's more of a poet. I didn't really like the reading parts that he does, the poetry parts that he reads on some songs. Not really into that, but I do like his voice. He does on certain songs, he sounds fantastic. Other songs, he's a little bit raspy, like he's almost screeching. Well, he doesn't do the music. The music is pretty much done by the members of the band, especially Robbie Krieger, who I think doesn't get credit, nearly the credit he should get for the music. If you listen to the Doors album, their seventh album, the one that came out after Morrison had left, the music is very good on that album, as good as anything they've done on any of their other albums. They just don't have the vocalist there. That's the only difference. But the music, Robbie Krieger does not get enough credit for the sound that the Doors made. Yes, Morrison is the front guy. He's the guy. He's the story, really, with his lyrics and his antics and his vocals. But the music, that's in a different realm by different people. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Guns N' Roses. The problem for me with Guns N' Roses is they're living on that one album. Yeah, some people say the next two albums were good too, but I never thought so. And that first album was good when I liked it, but they never did anything after that. And they're always trashing each other. They lie to their fans constantly. There's nothing really good. Really lost me was when they started um, arguing all the time when Iron Maiden. They constantly have this kind of thing going on with Iron Maiden. I don't know what that's all about, but to say that Iron Maiden doesn't make rock music is crazy. I mean, because what? Because for Axl Rose to say that he's a better singer than Bruce Dickinson is just insane to me. I don't really like his voice either. Can't stand his voice, to be honest with you. I think Slash is overrated, but I think if you asked me which member of that band of Guns N' Roses can I tolerate the most, I would probably say Slash because he actually has some talent. I don't think he's that great of a talent. It's kind of the same as the guy from U2. Another guy, very overrated. very average guitarist. I don't think he's as great as people. He's good at making riffs. There's no doubt about it. Both those bands have guys who can make the riffs, but very, very mediocre guitar players. Yeah, you're right about that. I can't say that. I disagree with that totally. I disliked U2 even more at one point than them because every time I would, and this was in my days when I listened to radio, every time I would go on, there'd always be this people would put U2 songs on, and then they would always say this right at the beginning. Oh, now from the rock's greatest rock band of all time, U2. And I go, get out of here. They're not even the top 10. They're not even a top 100 band. And I used to just burn my hide when I would hear that. Well, this is going to sound strange, Grandizer, but the first one that comes to mind is the Osmond Brothers. They did one song that was a heavy metal song. Absolutely killed it too. It was fantastic. If they had done more stuff like that, I would now have an Osmonds collection. I think it's called Wild Horses or Heavy Horses or something like that. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you're on the radio, though. You get burned out because you get. I like to choose the time and place of when I listen to my music. The problem with the radio is that sometimes music is forced on you that you don't really want to listen to at that particular time. And when you're not in the right mood for it and it's forced on you, it gets irritating. That's just what happens. Yep, absolutely. So give that Osmond song a try. I think you'll find it. I think it's called Wild Heavy Horses. Can't think of the name of the track now, but it's the Osmonds' attempt to do a heavy metal song. Really, actually, quite good. They were big. People don't know this about the Osmonds, but they were big fans of Led Zeppelin. No, Osmonds. Donny Osmond. You know who Donny Osmond is? Not Ozzy Osbourne. They're called the Osmond Brothers. They did all that puppy love and all that stuff like during the time when Michael Jackson was with the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds were back and forth with each other doing those pop hits. Well, they did a heavy metal song in kind of an ode to Led Zeppelin, I guess it was. But they did this song called Heavy Horse. If you get a chance, you can go online. Osmond is doing a heavy metal song. It's unbelievable. It's great. Yeah, way out there. Like it's not something you would even expect them to do ever. There's a few people out there that do stuff like that. Every once in a while they just go, hey, you know what? I'm going to do something nobody's expecting me to do. Kind of like when the country star, what's his name? He did that Kiss song, Hard Luck Woman. Can't think of his name right now. Not something you would expect them. Yeah, there's a lot of the Osmond cometh. Yeah, I guess that's probably a good way to put it. Yeah, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Bands will try different sounds to their music just because, you know, when you're with a band and you're playing the same stuff over and over again, it gets kind of tedious. You want to try something new. Even bands like Rush used to do stuff in the studio that's very kind of different than stuff they would never put it out as a Rush song because it doesn't sound like Rush, but they would have they had these little bands that they would pretend to be and play songs from stuff that normally you would never hear from them. A lot of bands do that just to try and be a little bit different, right? Or just try to make the boredom go away a little bit. Yeah, they did a great job on the song. It's fantastic, the song. but it doesn't make me want to collect the entire Osmond discography or anything like that. Still pretty good though. Even the Beach Boys, they changed their style when they did the Kokomo song in the 70s. It was different. It was more streamlined, I thought. It sounded a lot different than their earlier stuff. And the same with the Four Seasons. They did this September of '63. They did a fantastic view of that, maybe their best song. That album is actually very, very good. Quite a bit different than their other stuff. Yeah, there's a few bands like that for sure. Yeah, we could do I'm not much for songs. So to do one for 30 days, I don't think I could. I don't know if I could come up with 30 songs for 30 days like that. I'm not a big song person. I don't mind doing the odd kind of top 20, like I did last week with the top 25 pop songs. I thought I would do something like that, but to do it every day, I think would be beyond my grasp to do it. I prefer albums. I don't really listen to, like when I listen to this album, I take this album out to listen to it. I always listen to the entire album. You'll never find me go, you know what, I only want to listen to Watchers of the Sky and then take it off. I won't do that. I never do that. There is the occasion where I will listen to an album and there might be one song towards the end that I don't care for, so I take it off early. But even that I don't really do either. I'm not sure who he is. I'm not sure who Jerry Riopelli is. I don't know that name. It's not a name I've heard, anyways. Does he play with somebody that I should know? There's a couple of prog bands in the United States that I actually like as prog bands. One of them is Echelon. I don't really like their vocals that much. I don't think they're bad or anything like that. I don't think they're great or bad. I think they're kind of okay, but their music is good. I did a review on one on Saturday. I'll be doing another one next Saturday because they put two albums out the same day. Atlanta Rhythm Section. Okay, so I don't know much about the Atlanta Rhythm Section. I know of them. I've heard of them. I don't know if I know anything by them. Maybe I do. To me, they're kind of a band that maybe might fall into line with like Earth, Wind, and Fire and that. Bands I know of, but I don't know much about. I know a little bit more about Electric Light Orchestra, although I kind of put them in the same category, although they're very different sounding. So I'd have to listen to the Atlanta Rhythm Section to really tell you if I know much about them. I don't really, it's not a band I've really followed ever. And up until now, I've heard of them, of course, but there's a lot of bands I've heard of, but I've not really paid much attention to. So there's basically two categories of this type of band. Bands that I've heard of that I have no interest in and never will follow. And there's bands I've heard of and really haven't paid any attention to, and maybe I like them and maybe I don't. They probably fall into that because I don't really have an opinion about them. It's like the Commodores. There's a band that I've known and people talk to me about for years, but it's never been music I've ever followed. And back when I was a teenager, Commodores, Earth, Wind, and Fire, bands like that, to me, they were funk bands, and I just had no interest in them. Now, whether they're actually funk bands or not, I don't even know, right? But I just, I get a certain image of them, and I didn't want to listen to them. Now, that might change. Maybe that'll change. I guess the problem with them is that to me, they're not really rock bands. So, and this is a rock channel, so I don't know. It's kind of the same. Like I listen to, uh, at one point, I listened to a lot of Miley Cyrus, and that was basically because my daughter was a huge fan of hers. Now that my daughter's been moved out for a while, I don't really listen to her much anymore. Not, I don't dislike her by any stretch. I kind of liked her at some points. It's because you get used to certain sounds, right? The same with Rihanna. I have almost all of Rihanna's first half dozen albums. They're all great. I like them all, but I don't really listen to them much anymore. That music doesn't really have a huge staying power with me, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay, that makes sense. That would explain why I don't know him. The hard rock aspect, maybe I would have listened to. Country and jazz and R&B are not music I listen to much. R&B maybe more than the other two. I'm not a jazz fan. I don't dislike the music. It's not something I would sit down and listen to. Same with blues or country music. Well, country music I don't like, flat out don't like. I got inundated with that as a child. Can't really listen to it anymore. Okay, that makes sense. Here's one of the ways in which I listen to music too is that if a guy has a hit single, I might listen to it if I was listening to radio, but since I don't listen to radio, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. Now, back in the day, I did, but I had to hear more than one song by an artist before I would consider buying any of his albums because I discovered early on sometimes you buy an album because you think you love one song on it and you get it home and you find out that's the only song you like. That's happened to me a few times. So, generally speaking, I tend to lean towards bands that have albums that I like and not songs. There are some exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, like Gary Wright is a prime example of this. I love the song Dreamweaver. It's one of my favorite rock songs and actually should have been included in my list last week, but I forgot about it until after I'd already posted it. But I bought albums by him and I can't listen to them. It's just that one song. So he's a one song guy for me. So I don't buy albums from him. So I don't listen to him. And that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. I just used him as an example. There's lots of examples like that. Yeah, I don't know much about Buffy St. Marie. Don't know anything about her music at all. I've never been drawn to it. Yeah, I do like some folk music, but I like my folk music mixed in with rock, not so much with pop music. Some people like it. Um, I don't know. I guess I'd have to hear an album by her, but I wouldn't buy one. I would have to listen to it and decide if it's something I'd want to be involved with. Yeah, well, that's normal now. A lot of people they've just what they've done with radio now is they've kind of streamed it down to a very select group of songs by select bands. So you might have 100 bands and maybe they have 5 songs each. So you got about 500 songs that are going to be played over and over and over again. And they don't vary outside of that very often. Some stations, of course, will move outside of that on the occasion, but for the most part, they have a set list that might include 400 or 500 songs, and they don't vary from that at all. That's part of the reason I don't want to listen. That and the fact that I know if I listen to the station long enough, I'll get the same songs repeated over and over and just be bored to death. Yeah, when I'm at work, I never listen to the radio. I can't even remember the last time. What I do sometimes is because I figured out how to do this is I will use the phone from my work phone to play an album that I like. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't even know who Leon Russell is. I will have to admit openly, I don't know who he is. Couldn't tell you. Never heard of him. That's not a name I'm familiar with. It's not in my it's not in my wheelhouse, so that's part of the reason why I don't listen to him. To me, it's the reason I chose the title Prog Monster is because I am a monster for prog music. Anything outside of that, it diminishes quite a bit. So the way it works with me is you got prog is like the huge umbrella, and then underneath you've got some heavy metal, and underneath that you got some hard rock, and then lesser pop music. And then once you get down to the pop, it's a small selection. Yeah, I'm not sure who he is. I can't tell you much about him. I've never heard the name before. It's new to me, which means it's likely outside of my wheelhouse. There is some stuff outside of my wheelhouse that does get in occasionally, but not too much. Not when it comes to rock. Yeah, I've heard it. Maybe if he's part of the swamp rock, I've not been a big fan of swamp rock, so it's not a genre that I follow much. Yeah, maybe. I don't think I'm like Daffy Duck, but maybe I am. Yeah, so for me, it's all about the prog music. That's the music that I enjoy the most. Maybe, on occasion I venture out of that and listen to some psychedelic stuff, or I listen to hard rock, or I may listen metal is the other one that is probably the next strongest for me. And there are some folky stuff that I like too. Earlier folk that's mixed with rock. I like that. People like Paul Simon, Neil Young, CSN. Um, I even don't mind. I can't even think of her name now. I like Pat Benatar, even she's kind of outside of my wheelhouse as well, but I don't mind her music. Yeah, I'd have to get some fake teeth first before I could put them in. Yeah, that's true. I've heard that about George Harrison. So um, some of his stuff I like. The stuff I like by him, I actually like quite a bit. But there's a lot of stuff by him that doesn't do anything for me. That's kind of the same with Paul McCartney. He has stuff I really like by him, and there's a lot of stuff by him I don't really like either. So there's some bands like that for me, like the Pretenders. The first 3 or 4 Pretenders albums, I absolutely love them, and after that, I don't have any use for them anymore. Or Heart, same thing. All the stuff that was released up to 1980 by Heart, I love. Anything that came after that, you can't. I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't listen to it. I don't care for it. Bob Seger is another guy I don't really care for. I can't even think of a single song that I like by him. I know a couple songs by him, but they do nothing for me. To me, Bob Seger is kind of the same as Bruce Springsteen and Bryan Adams, and I know they don't really sound much alike, but they fall into that same well. There are some stuff there that I've heard and know a little bit about. I have to admit, I do like some of Bruce Springsteen's stuff, but I don't really care for Bruce Springsteen himself. But the music, some of his music, and now he's got this new collection out of 7 albums that have never been released before. So there's a lot there, but yeah. Yeah, I think that hard stuff is just, to me, it's just bubblegum rock. The 80s stuff is just bubblegum rock, but not even the good bubblegum rock like Cheap Trick. Like Cheap Trick has a bit of a bubblegum rock feel to them too, but bands like Def Leppard after their 3rd album, Hard after their 80s, when they got into the 80s. So a lot of bands became very kind of poppy to the point where it's almost hard to swallow. Yeah, his soloing stuff, that's a good way of putting it, swampy. I don't dislike him. He's just not somebody I listen to. If he comes on the radio, other than if I'm somewhere and that song, something by him comes on, I don't get upset by it or anything like that. There is one song by him, I think it's Night something, that they play on the playlist at work, and it's sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, and I've tuned it out now. I don't even hear it. Yeah, their 70s content is really what I would listen to. I have all their 70s stuff right up to that live greatest hits album that they put out in 1980, which was actually the first one I had. So I went back and got all the stuff that was on that album. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, overplayed. That's the problem. The problem, and this is a problem across a lot of bands for me, is that one song that gets played so much gives you a negative feeling, and then you won't even go and explore any of their discography. If you know what I'm saying, you've got that image. And I had this with Jethro Tull for the very longest time, right up until the turn of the century, where I had that Aqualung in my head. That's the way I thought they sounded, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And it wasn't that that song was necessarily bad; it just got too much play. And so for decades, I went and never listened to them because of that. And now they're probably my second favorite band. And that's just how it works, right? Pink Floyd's the same. The Wall really put the kibosh on them for decades as well, until the turn of the century, when I really started to explore their discography. Prior to that, I don't want anything to do with them because I didn't like the sound of the Wall. It wasn't an album I really liked. You know, and I can say that about Gentle Giant too. Made a little bit different with Gentle Giant. I just found their music hard to penetrate, but now I absolutely love it, right? So it just depends on how you overcome it, right? Bob Seger, though, I don't think his style of music is in my wheelhouse, so that's why I don't really pursue it. He's one of those guys that would be on a list for me of bands I know of but don't really listen to. I did one of those shows not so long ago, and I put like this, I think there was like 25 bands on there that I never really listened to nor have any interest in listening to. There used to be a band called Hot Chocolate. This is way out of my wheel well as well. Not in my wheelhouse at all. But for some reason, the one song is all I've always liked. And I've actually went and explored some of their discography to see if that song was an aberration or was typical of their music. And the song is called You Sexy Thing. And I like that song, but the rest of the music is kind of similar, but not really interesting to me. So in a way, they're a little bit different that way, because I do have liked and did like that song at one point, but I don't think it's enough for me to actually go and buy their stuff. No, it's called You Sexy Thing. I think it's the name of the song. not a bad band, but to me they're kind of a funk band or a funk type band, like Earth, Wind and Fire, the Commodores, Hot Chocolate. All these are kind of funk bands in my way, and I've never been a funk band lover. I don't dislike them. They're good if you're going to a dance. No, I don't know. No hot women have ever told me about anything about that song. R&B. There's a good way to label them. I'm not a big, huge fan of R&B music. I don't dislike it. Yeah, it's a stupid name for the band. I think the lead guy's a black guy, and so he's hot. He thinks he's hot looking, so he's called it Hot Chocolate. I don't even know whether the reason they would come up with a name like that. Yeah, I know that song. I've heard that song, but I did, like I said, I did approach and listen to some of their discography a bit just to see if that's one song was just uniquely interested in it for that reason. And I think that's all it was. I didn't really like or dislike any of their stuff. I listened to it and then never thought about it again. Pretty much that's it. I'm pretty much what I said. There's a certain style of music. I have discovered over the length of the time on this channel that there are some elements of music that have become more appealing to me than they did prior to this. Or maybe I always found them appealing, but only had a limited exposure to them, like doom metal. My exposure to doom metal comes from Black Sabbath, so I thought they were the only ones doing that, so I never really pursued it. But in recent months and stuff, I've begun to explore that genre. I have several albums by bands that do that, like Cathedral and Pentagram. These are two bands I've begun to explore because I wanted to get more into that music. Yeah, their first couple of albums are very good. Chicago's first two albums, exceptional. Terry Kaff, people have always told me he was a great guitarist, but after having listened to Chicago Transit Authority and their second album, I have to totally 100% concur. The guy is extraordinary. I can see why Hendrix found him fascinating. Prince is a funny kind of guy. I don't think of him as a guitarist. Like, I know he's a fantastic guitar player. There's no two ways about it. Really good guitar player, but I don't think of him as a guitar player. To me, he's a kind of funk or R&B artist, and I just never followed that music. It's not music I really listen to. Yeah, if I was going to choose, I don't mind the Chicago's first half dozen albums are pretty good. I actually bought one today. It was on sale in the used bin, Chicago 6. I think the first 5 or 6 are pretty decent albums, but it makes sense because Terry Kaff was still alive during those albums. Once he was out of the group, I found they kind of went over much further over than I was interested in going, so I stopped following them. We will be doing some hard rock stuff on Sunday morning this week when I do the live stream for the 70s hard rock ranker, which I'm going to be doing these guys. Kiss. Sorry, I chose this album. It's one of their worst covers. I don't know why they did it in neon, like they did it. So you've got this, and then you have the negative. So what was the point to it? I don't really get it. So we'll be doing a ranking of those albums on that show. And I'm going to try to only do rankings on that of the hard rock stuff. So I will pick a band every couple of weeks and rank their 70s stuff. The reason I chose only to do the 70s is because that's what I know most about. And a lot of these hard rock bands changed their entire style of music in the 80s to a point where it's not even listenable to anymore. I don't collect vinyl at all. Vinyl has a lot of issues that I don't care for. It's bulky, takes up a lot of space. I don't really like the vinyl itself. The album covers and that get damaged easy. They scratch easy. You have to have the proper turntable for it, and it's endless. I never really cared much for vinyl, so I was really happy when they invented CDs. Now, I don't care as much for the CD technology as the vinyl technology. The analog technology, I think, is better than the digital technology, and there's reasons for that, I think. No more Kiss Army for me. I left that when I was 12. Yeah, and that was a terrible movie, one of the worst ever made. Chicago is great. Their early stuff is good. Those first two albums, especially that first album. Terry Kath is off the charts on that album. I can see why Hendrix liked him. He emulated him a lot off of that album. Just an absolutely incredible display of guitar ability on that album. Yeah, there's people that like it. It's kind of like, I guess, comic books. The older comic books are big in collectors and not so much the ones to me, it's the same after about the mid 1980s. So with comics, it was the 60s, 70s, and mid 80s. And then I got out of it and I never collected anything since. Although I've been going back periodically and buying the odd one. It's the same kind of thing with vinyl, I think. You mean when it breaks? I don't like that sound. I gave my entire vinyl collection to my sister. Yeah, they were pioneering. I think if you listen to their albums, very kind of, there's a psychedelic element to it. There's kind of an R&B element to their music, of course. The use of brass and woodwind instruments really add a component to their music. I don't know enough about Chicago to really tell you what their influence is. They're just a band. For me, the last year or so has been when I started kind of getting into their stuff. I did do a listen to their first 8 albums online. Kind of by the 7th or 8th, I was done. The first 4 or 5, though, I thought were really good, and they got progressive. They were progressively better the further back you went. So that first Chicago Transit album and the second one, which has nothing on it except for Chicago, both of them were really good, and then it progressively gets less from there on in. Yeah, I do have the Indigada La Vida album. If I can see it here, I'll grab it somewhere here. Over here in my Iron Maiden collection somewhere. I can't see it though. Sorry, I don't see it, but I know it's here. Yeah, I don't see it. I apologize, but I'm not going to pull it off the shelf if I can't see it. I don't want to pull the whole shelf down trying to find it. But yeah, I do have that. Iron Butterfly, very psychedelic band, I think. I call them a rock psychedelic band. I don't mind them. They're a band that probably would do a little bit more listening to when a chance comes. Yeah, their first 2 albums have a fair number of hits too, I think. The only thing about Chicago I had difficulty with, and I think one of the reasons why I never followed them earlier is a lot of their albums are double albums. A lot of them. And I've never been a fan of double albums. I find it hard to believe that any band can come up with 2 albums worth of really good stuff. Most bands are hard pressed to get 1 album in of really good stuff, and then you start getting a lot of filler. And listening to these Chicago albums, yeah, there's some really, really top-notch stuff on it, but there's a lot of filler on there too. It's the same on all, even Genesis, um, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. There's probably a good solid 1 album worth of really great material. Then the other album would have maybe one side would be good, the other side's not so good, you know. No, nothing comes to mind at the moment. I'm exploring some of the new stuff I've gotten. I got quite a bit of newer prog stuff from Laser CD a few weeks ago, well, back in June. And I'm just starting to explore it now, including like Eden Song, which is in my in my playlist. I haven't listened to much of that stuff yet, so I'm going to I got some Tuskmore that I have to listen to. That's a band I like, but they require you to actually sit there and pay attention, or it's not gonna absorb very well. Hey Ben, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. Hope you're enjoying my take on some of these. Well, actually, I haven't been talking much about them, on some of these great progressive rock vocalists. Yeah, the guy you're probably thinking of is Brendan Snyder. If you want, first of all, he has a great collection, probably the biggest collection of CDs of anybody I know. I don't know, I'm maybe even more than Pete Pardo, but those are the two big, huge collections. And the thing I like about Brendan's show is that he does this show once a week where he talks about new stuff that's coming out. And it doesn't just he doesn't list them. He goes into depth about who's on the album, when they put out an album before, if there's been changes to the music, what's the music sound like, and then the ones that he actually purchased, he'll go into more depth with. But he'll bring up every single album that came out that week that he thinks is of interest to people watching his channel. I find him very in depth. Really, if you wanna learn stuff about music before you actually go and buy it, that's the guy to watch, in my opinion, as far as the new stuff goes. Now, if you watch of course, nobody knows more about music and about the music out there than Pete Pardo. Like, is there anybody who does a better job of presenting music than him? I don't think so. There's some really good channels out there with a lot of good introspective. Some of them are more technically breaking down the music. Some are more generally breaking it down. Some of them talk about they have big collections. They talk generally about how the albums make them feel, but Pete really does both. He kind of talks about how they interact and how they feel with him, but he also breaks them down fairly well too. Yeah, you're right. He does. Yeah, if Grandizer, if you're looking for a guy who kind of breaks down new stuff that you might like, Brendan Snyder would be the guy I would suggest you go and look his channel up. If you like metal, I would say Bryce Talks Metal is another really good one, or the what's that called? The Alchemist. That guy knows a lot of stuff too. Yeah, all those guys, Phil, um, uh, Pete Pardo, Brendan Snyder, they all have massive collections. There's no way on earth, if I live another 10 years, I wouldn't even get close to that. But you know what? There's the one thing you find out when you start doing this and you're listening to all these different channels and all this different music is there is just an endless amount of rock music that's still being produced. Way more now than at any time in the past. It's just massive amounts of stuff out there. There's no way you could listen to all this stuff every day. Like if there was 20 albums out a week, that's all I would be listening to is just those 20 albums, and I'd only get them in once. So you have to be selective on what you want to listen to, really. So what I usually do with Brendan is I listen to everything he says when he's doing his show. And and this is not something I'm proud of doing, but as he's talking about the albums, if it's an album I know immediately I'm not going to be interested in, I just fast forward a little bit to the next album. That's just what I do. That doesn't help his channel much, but you have to be selective too. But if he's talking about something I'm interested in, I will listen to the entire conversation. And when he does the shows where they're talking about particular group, I do. I did like his recent ranking of the Doors albums too, because I was unaware that I knew there was at least one Doors album out there that they had put out after Jim Morrison had left, and I didn't know that it was I thought there was just a one, but there was actually three. So yeah, fascinating. Yeah, well, basically what Brendan said to me is what I heard him say when he was explaining, because he has probably 15,000 CDs, and he did the math to figure out if it was possible to listen to every single one of them. And based on what he said, it's pretty likely that he has listened to every single CD at least once on his list. He says that if he listened to them all the way he normally listened to them, he could go 4.5 years before he would have to repeat one. It's on YouTube. You can find him on YouTube at Brendan Snyder. Snyder's with a Y. Yeah, you got to remember these guys are pretty much living this stuff. This is what they do. Like they are listening to this music nonstop, and after a while, it's like anything. The more you listen to it, the more you talk to people, and you're talking and you're living it all the time. Stuff that doesn't normally come to mind for an average person like ourselves comes to their mind easily. It's just repetition. Like some of the stuff that I have, like my Rush stuff, I know in every detail about a lot of their stuff because I've listened to it for so long. The longer you listen to it, the better you get with it as well. Yeah, it's amazing, but then you got to remember that they have acquired listening tastes, listening skills that they've developed over decades of listening to albums, and they know how to do it. It's just and I have acquired some of this as well, not as nearly as much as them, because my collection isn't even close to that size. Yeah, the beard is gone, so the monster's in hibernation. So I'm just gonna, before we go, I'm just gonna go over some of these vocalists one more time, just so if you want to check them out, you can. So Peter Gabriel is one of the guys I love. Peter Nickel, vocalist for IQ. If you like progressive, that neo-prog progressive music, you're gonna love these guys. Well worth your listen time. Genesis. So with Genesis, you've got both Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel there as well. Ian Anderson wasn't one of my favorites initially, but he has become one of my favorites now. Greg Lake, I love. I wished he'd done more stuff with King Crimson, but he didn't. Pink Floyd's David Gilmour and Richard Wright together, especially like that combo. I think it's David St. Clair or Richard St. Clair. I think it's Richard actually does the vocals. So Richard, really good, interesting vocal sound, very different and appealing, very British sounding. Andres Wettergreen Stroman Pressmo, or Andres Pressmo, great vocalist, underrated, very John Anderson sounding like, but you can tell the difference, but definitely in that range. Of course, both the guys from Supertramp, Ricky Davis and Roger Hudson. And of course, John Anderson is probably the king of prog rock as far as vocalists go. And there's others too. Some I don't like, some as much, but I still like them. Probably you're right. I'm a bit of a, where Pete Pardo is a, if you watch him, he's a big lover of monster movies. Him and Chris Allo, they both like their monster movies a lot. I tend to be more of the science fiction stuff. I do like the Godzilla stuff quite a bit, and the Battle of the Gargantuas and King Kong and that kind of stuff too. But I'm a science fiction buff. I know a lot about all that science fiction stuff. Always have been. There's a channel that I watch sometimes called Isaac Arthur. He's the guy with the kind of Elmer Fudd voice. If you hear him, God, he can talk a storm. The only thing about him is when you're listening to him, he talks in parts. So he'll give you a little part of this, a little part of that, a little part of this. And then if you're not following, it's difficult to put it together. But other than that, the guy just knows everything. Fascinating channel. Yeah, that's me. I like that kind of stuff. For comic books, I used to collect a lot. Not so much now. And of course, reading books are another big thing for me. I have books everywhere. Yep. I like all the Godzilla stuff. Really good. Battle of Monster Island. Yep. One of my favorites. Recently, I watched the Battle of the War of the Gargantuas, which is a show that came out in the 60s that when I was a kid, I loved it. Now I watch it and think, this is terrible. Yeah, maybe. Anyways, guys, I've reached the end of my rope here at an hour and 40 minutes, so I'm going to have to shut her down. But I do appreciate your guys' talk. I know we didn't talk much about the Vocalists, but we did talk a lot about rock music and about stuff that we like and don't like. And that's, to me, what it's all about. Yeah. Yeah. Godzilla, Rodan. There's a famous Rodan story for me. Yeah. Well, Pete Pardo has a wife and he has almost as big a collection. So a wife isn't always an impediment to a large CD collection, but it can be. But I think the wives realize that these guys have special issues. Yeah, I don't think he has kids. And I think Pete's right. His wife is very understanding, though, because I'm sure that mailman is, or the parcel delivery guy is probably coming to his door nonstop. And that's hard for a woman to deal with. But he has a massive collection. But I'm sure she understands that he's doing a channel unlike anybody else's channel. In order to keep this going, he has to keep doing what he's doing, and and she probably enjoys the financial help that comes along with that channel as well. I don't think he's making millions of dollars by any stretch. He has a job still, but I'm sure that he's doing okay. That's true. If you have no kids, you have extra cash. But he does have, I think he has several dogs as well. And they can be just as expensive as children, trust me. Anyways, Ben, Grandizer, Wade, I thank you all for supporting the channel and coming here and seeing me week after week here on Into the Progverse. Next week, we're going to be doing a collection, I believe. I'm going to put it up. It's going to be my Styx collection. Now, Styx is generally a band I don't think of as a prog band, but lately they've been a lot more proggy, so I'm going to put them into the prog category. No dogs, cats, or any other animals. I don't have time. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. We'll see you next Sunday night, hopefully, here on the Prog Monster. And then for those of you who, like Ben, if you came in late and didn't know, I'm going to be doing a live stream Thursday night for the Hammer of the Gods, which is the metal show. And then we've moved the hard rock show to the Saturday. It was originally Saturday at 9. I'm going to move it to Sunday at 9. Because of the problems with the construction going on here periodically. So that will be the 70s hard rock rankers, where we're going to be doing Kiss. We're going to do Kiss for the first time out. Only my 70s collection. All the shows that I do on that will only be about their 70s. And there's two reasons for that. One, it's what I'm most familiar with for hard rock. And two, going forward, a lot of hard rock bands became more pop bands, and I don't really listen to them at all. So anyways, I wish you all a good evening, good night from Prog Monster. Take care. We'll see you soon again on the channel. Goodbye.